Welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining me. I'm your host, Christopher Gajewski. Let's get naked about mental health. I told you I'd make it to the Robin Williams Good Morning Vietnam point sometime. Did it work? Too much? Not there yet? In this episode, I'll be continuing with the Suicide Prevention or Suicide Awareness Month theme. I've gone to the extreme where I almost committed suicide, took everybody to the other side of suicide, those left behind, and now I want to discuss the gentler side of suicide. Yes, there is a gentler side. Michelangelo will also be making another cameo appearance. Before getting into the episode, the important stuff, I just want to remind everybody that I am not a psychologist, psychiatrist, therapist, or any kind of professional with an "ist" at the end of their title. I am just a guy who has been there. If you are in crisis or know somebody who is, I implore you to reach out to a professional. There is now a national hotline you can call or text, 988. I'll repeat that because it bears repeating. If you or someone you know is in crisis, I implore you to reach out to a professional. Dialing or texting 988 will put you in touch with a crisis counselor instantly. Now, let's get into the episode. Why is water wet? It's a simple enough question, but can you answer it? Think about it. Where is Neil deGrasse or Bill Nye the Science Guy when you need them? It's a simple question that probably has a very complicated answer. I've spent the better part of the last few years asking a similar question. What is normal? I know the complicated answers and even the evasive ones. There is no such thing as normal. Normal is a range. It cannot be defined. Yes, it can. I see it all around me. Hey, I know everybody has issues. But I also know that everyone thinks and but I also know that not everybody thinks and reacts like I do. What's the baseline? What's the average? The hell if I know. It was not until a counseling session about a decade ago that I realized that having suicidal thoughts is not in the normal range. I was in the session discussing other things with my therapist, and it popped out that the suicidal thoughts were back. Then I moved on with the current discussion. Wait, he said, interrupting me. Let's discuss the suicidal thoughts. I was taken off guard. I had been on a roll with something or another, something important. Why, I asked. He looked at me questioningly. Don't you want to discuss the suicidal thoughts? Not particularly, I said. I had been through the routine. I don't have a plan to hurt myself. I am not planning on doing it, and I definitely don't have time to be hospitalized. I wanted to get back to the other important thing I was discussing. This session was costing me money. I had the money, but it was also costing me time that I didn't have. I was a business owner with a lot to do. An hour here and the hour and a half commute were two and a half extra hours I would have to spend at work. But now I could see that he didn't understand. Him not understanding put me back on my heels. Whatever important thing I had been discussing went flittering away. I have suicidal thoughts, I said. I have for as far back as I can remember. Doesn't everybody have them? No, he said, they don't. I guess as a trained therapist, he was a PsyD. He had been taught not to say, this is not normal. So we discussed the suicidal thoughts, the softer or gentler side of suicide. I don't know when they entered my life. My best guess would be high school. I think I struggled with them at first, but just the thought of suicide appalled me. I had been on the other side of someone attempting it. My mind could not even wrap around the idea of putting a plan in place, let alone acting on the plan. A bottle of pills, a razor, a gun, jumping. My mind had cataloged and listed all the ways to do it and discarded them as not for me. That did not make them go away, though. They would pop into my mind from time to time. They still do. I should kill myself. Just a thought, an idea, a reaction. Then it goes away. I refer to them as gnats on a summer evening. I wave them aside and get on with things. Sometimes the thought is just an individual one here and there. Sometimes they come in clusters for days and weeks. They have even lasted months. It is just something I've gotten used to. It became part of my normal. They actually swarmed a couple weeks ago and then again a week ago. I hit a couple of rough patches. I waved the gnats aside and got on with things. Last week, I think it was last week or the week before, when I wrote or said, the suicidal thoughts are back, that's what I meant. I did not have a plan in place. The thoughts just really annoy me. Also back in high school, I injured my back. It was the summer between freshman and sophomore year. I remember that in particular. I was doing a high dive, bouncing up and down on the diving board, when the lifeguard called out to me while I was bouncing up and down. So, of course, I fell. I twisted wrong, and that was the end of my football playing days. My back has always hurt from time to time since then. I guess I was about 15 years ago, a new thing started. I would feel a twinge, no pain, and then I would lose all strength in my lower body. I would find myself on the floor for a few minutes, just staring up, waiting for the strength to return, no pain. It does, and then I get back up and return to whatever I was doing. The fun times are when it happens in public, at malls or something. Everybody rushes over to me with their phones out, ready to dial 911. And I'm just like, no problem here, just normal. I'll be fine in a few minutes. Thank you. That's the way I think of the suicidal thoughts. I don't talk about them. No problem here, just normal. I'll be fine in a few minutes. Do not call the frickin' ambulance. In the therapist's office, though, I finally realized they are not normal. I still haven't done anything about it, though. But why is water wet? I did give myself a clue a long time ago. When I was in college, so 1995 or so, I wrote an article that got published. It was on dysthymia, a low-grade chronic depression. It is a mental illness that cannot even be diagnosed until you have had it for at least 2 years. At the time, there was a debate over whether or not it was a distinct illness or just a part of major depressive disorder. I have no idea where the argument stands now. To help people visualize it for the article, I offered a graph. The y-axis, or the vertical line, is a person's mental state, from 1 to 100. The lower range is depression, and the upper range is happiness. The x-axis, or horizontal, is time. Days, weeks, months, years, a person's lifetime. I used thoughts of my mother and her bipolar disorder, manic depression, for comparison with a normal range. Yes, I did define a normal range. A person's normal range will be between 40 and 60. They will live within that range with few aberrations. Major life events will push them out of that range for a time, but they will return to that baseline, that average. The death of a loved one might push a person down to 30. The birth of a child up to 75. The lower high will go on for a while, but then they return to that normal range. A clinical depressive episode can be devastating. It will bring a person down to 10 to 20, and they will stay there for weeks, maybe months without intervention. I would guess that 10 is non-functioning. A manic episode can be just as devastating. It will push a person up to the 80 to 90 range where they will stay for days and maybe weeks. I would guess that 90 is completely out of control. I saw my mother swing through both. the spiral downward, and then the climb up. What was for her glorious heights. Just as an aside here, as it is Suicide Awareness Month, I read somewhere and know from experience that the most dangerous time for a person when it comes to suicide is not when they are in the non-functioning depressive state. It is when they are still in the depressed range and climbing back out. I speak about it in the previous episode. It's just something to keep in mind. But dysthymia in that normal range. The range is from 40 to 60. A person with dysthymia, a low-grade chronic depression, will drop just below the normal range to about 35 and then stay there. Their world is dull and gray. Happiness may strike in short, brief spurts, but 35 becomes the norm. The article was titled Dysthymia, the Thief of Happiness. I'm pretty sure I have it on my website somewhere. I'll make sure that it's up on there in case you want to check it out. But why is water wet? I really started confusing the hell out of my friends when I started talking to them a few years back about this. They didn't understand the question. All I knew was that I was not normal, and I wanted to know what the normal range was. So I had a basis for comparison. So, suicidal thoughts are not normal. What else was I missing? I tried to think about things for years but gave up. I went the escapism route, and it worked. I allowed my profession and family to consume me. Consume is a good word because that is exactly what it did. It consumed everything that I had, everything that I was. I would have the occasional suicidal thoughts, but they were very few and far between. I was even happy most of the time. Who has time to be depressed when they are on almost 24/7? Think of a forest fire. Once all the forest is gone, the fire burns out and there's nothing left. Eventually, though, other things will enter and begin to grow. For me, it was the depression. It was also thought. Why is water wet? I knew I had deficiencies. I would call them broken things, but since episode 8, I am trying to stay away from that idea. Still reaching for new terminology. So let's use deficiencies for now. It's actually kind of ironic because the one friend who said I think too much made me do the most thinking. Justine. She was this incredible woman and we became friends. At that time in my life, I started to explore the relationships around me, especially the people I was closest to. I was most interested in the people who seemed to have healthy boundaries with their spouses, significant others, and the people that they were closest to. Justine was an enigma to me. She was a wild spirit, a beautiful soul with a non-traditional outlook on life. Hey, she was a biker chick with tattoos and completely outside of my experiences. A tiny little thing, she was unabashedly honest and open, and she had boundaries. I pissed her off, but first I freaked her out. Forest fires and boundaries and Justine. How the hell did I stumble into this one? But I'm going with it because it makes sense. Well, it makes sense in my mind. I hope it makes sense to you. To fight a forest fire, they will create fire breaks. They will even create controlled fires to burn away the fuel to keep the forest fire from spreading uncontrolled. As I traveled, which is a reference to my book, I saw breaks that had to have been intentional in case there was a fire. You see, I didn't have any fire breaks in me. There were no boundaries. I had no idea that I didn't have any boundaries. Maybe there is even something in the back of my head that says boundaries are wrong. Having boundaries with someone that you love is unnatural. You don't hold anything back. Pour all of yourself into everything that you do. I love Justine. As I mentioned, I was empty and things were starting to grow again. I got drunk one night and I told her. I saw the look in her eyes and tried to explain it. I was too drunk, though, and I don't think I did a very good job of it. Special note, I am not a heavy drinker. Not many people have ever seen me in that condition. Justine was not expecting it because I had only had 2 or 3 beers. I take a certain medication, though, where every once in a long while, that 2 or 3 beers can feel like 20. That's what happened. Yeah, when I told her I loved her, I'm pretty sure I freaked her out. But I did love her. I loved her from the second or the third day that I met her. I loved her spirit. It is not like I was about to propose. We were not even dating. I loved her the same way that I love a lot of special kind of people. She was special. She became a teacher and a friend, an outlet during a dark time in my life. She awoke something in me that I thought dead. In my condition, though, I don't think it came out that way. Yes, dear one, in case you are listening, I love you. I did manage to explain to her about the meds, and she believed me. I had been with her the entire evening, arrived sober, so she knew exactly how much I had to drink. We continued to talk about things, but other nights, and I started to run into her boundaries. I loved her and she loved me, but she held back. That's when I got pissed off. That's when she got pissed off at me. The anger at Justine didn't make sense to me, so I thought long and hard about the person who said I thought too much. We had stopped talking, and I missed her, but I was angry, so I thought about it more. I realized I was not angry at her or at her boundaries. I was angry at the lack of my own. I recognized that she had healthy boundaries. It is hard looking into a mirror and seeing something disfigured looking back at you. Justine was that mirror. At first, I had no idea what to do with this information. Then I think I did a healthy thing. I reached out, so damn afraid of being rejected, and explained. She accepted. We went out to dinner and had a very long conversation. We dipped and dived into deeper things, but kept things light for the most part. I had my friend back and did not want to scare her away. I'd still piss her off from time to time. I try not to anymore. She didn't understand, and I don't blame her. I was probing her boundaries, trying to understand them. At times, I think she felt as if I was pushing at them, challenging them, and maybe I was. I'm new at all this. I had no idea what the hell I was doing. Still don't at times. Why is water wet? Back to episode 8. When Michelangelo was asked how he created David, he said he saw the angel within the marble and had to release it. I have a lot of chipping to do, but have to do it carefully. How do you get the nose out without chopping it off? I wonder how long Michelangelo left his tools to the side when working on something and just considered it instead. Thinking, evaluating. I wonder if he spent entire nights without ever picking up the hammer. I imagine this is where a therapist would come in handy. Instead, though, I began to examine my friendships and relationships, people watching, friend watching. Then I learned how to step more carefully through the woods and new growth. I want to go on here. I want to talk about Sarah, another wonderful woman and relationship coach who gave me the insight I needed to talk to Justine, to reach back out to her. I want to talk about Papa Bear, Mike. Jason and Crystal are tugging at me with their wonderful children. But I think it's time to put down the hammer and chisel for the day. Step back and consider. Or maybe step completely away. Follow Justine's advice and not think too much for a while before I accidentally chop that nose off. But I'm thinking that perhaps the softer side of suicide is the most dangerous of places. It is filled with ambiguity and circular paths. Not dealing with it, not even knowing it was something that should be dealt with, was maybe a part of the reason that I almost did walk through that doorway. I have some thinking to do, but not tonight. And that's a wrap for the episode. I'll keep talking and hope that you will as well. Aloha.